You know, it feels like every single day there's some new headline about AI, right? Changing everything.
It really does. Non-stop.
Well, get this latest one. Sounds like a pretty significant move happening, kind of behind the scenes in software development.
Oh, yeah. What's the buzz?
It's about Apple and Anthropic. Reports are surfacing, mostly from Bloomberg News initially, about them teaming up.
Apple and Anthropic. Interesting pairing. What are they supposedly working on?
Something internally called vibe coding.
Vibe coding. Okay, that's evocative. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, the reports suggest it's basically a new version, or maybe an enhancement, of Apple's coding software, Xcode.
Ah, Xcode. Right, so what's the vibe part?
That's the AI angle. It's apparently designed to use generative AI quite deeply.
To do what, exactly?
To help programmers write code, edit it, even test it. Think of it like having an AI co-pilot right there in your development environment.
Okay, wow. So not just suggesting fixes, but potentially generating chunks of code.
Seems like it. A big step up from, basic syntax highlighting.
Definitely. And is there any word on which AI they're using?
Yeah, the report specifically mentioned Anthropic's Claude Sonnet model.
Claude Sonnet. Okay, that makes a certain kind of sense.
How so? Why Anthropic for this?
Well, Anthropic's models, particularly the Claude series, have been getting a bit of a reputation on developers specifically for coding tasks.
Really? Better than others?
Some developers seem to think so. They find them quite adept at, understanding the context of the code and generating genuinely useful stuff.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, you actually see their models already powering some of these newer vibe coding platforms, things like Cursor, maybe Windsurf.
Right. So there's precedent for using Claude in this way.
Exactly. Developers have mentioned things like its ability to grasp complex dependencies or suggest pretty accurate code completions. It seems to have a knack for it.
Okay. So Apple tapping Anthropic for an internal coding tool fits that picture.
It does. It suggests they're specifically targeting that strength.
Now, this isn't Apple's only AI partnership, is it? They're working with others, too.
Right. We know they've publicly talked about using OpenAI's ChatGPT for some of the upcoming Apple Intelligence features.
Yeah, the more user-facing stuff.
Precisely. And there have been, whispers and reports about maybe integrating Google's Gemini later on as well, perhaps as another option.
So OpenAI for user features, potentially Google for broader AI, maybe, and now Anthropic specifically for internal developer tools.
That seems to be the emerging picture, yeah. A multi-partner strategy, picking the best tool for the job, perhaps.
Does this feel like they're hedging their bets, or is it more strategic than that?
It could be a bit of both, but leaning towards strategic, I think. Bolstering their internal capabilities, specifically software development, seems like a focused goal here.
Right, using AI to build their own products faster or better.
Exactly. While OpenAI handles the flashier consumer features, Anthropic helps streamline the engine room, so to speak.
Makes sense. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. What about the developers themselves? The people actually writing code at Apple, and maybe eventually outside Apple. What could this vibe coding mean for their day-to-day?
Oh, potentially quite a lot. I mean, think about the possibilities.
Like what, just faster coding?
Faster coding, certainly, but also maybe faster iteration on ideas. You could try out different approaches much more quickly if the AI is handling some of the grunt work.
Yeah. Less time debugging boilerplate stuff, maybe more time on the actual design.
Potentially. Or exploring solutions that maybe a human developer wouldn't immediately think of. It could change the creative process, too.
That raises a big question, though. How does this affect the skills developers need if the AI writes more code?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a really critical point.
Yeah.
The emphasis might shift, less focus on writing every single line perfectly, perhaps, and more on high-level design system architecture.
Defining the problem really well for the AI.
Exactly. Prompt engineering, but for code. And critically reviewing, guiding, and integrating what the AI produces, making sure it actually fits the larger goals and quality standards.
So different skills become more valuable, more architectural maybe, more critical assessment.
Could be. It's about working with the AI, not just handing tasks off to it.
And it's important to remember, you mentioned this is currently planned just for internal use at Apple, right?
Yes, that's what the reports indicate. No firm decision yet on releasing it publicly.
How big a difference does that make? Internal tool versus public product?
It's pretty significant, actually. Keeping it internal first lets Apple use their own engineers as essentially a massive beta testing group.
Right. Work out the kinks in a controlled environment.
Precisely. They can refine it, see what works, what doesn't, tailor it to their specific workflows before even thinking about unleashing it on the wider world.
Which, if they did release it, would obviously be a much bigger disruption.
Absolutely. It would affect the entire ecosystem of developers building for Apple platforms and potentially set a new standard.
Okay. Now, Apple's move here, even if internal for now, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, does it? This feels like part of a much bigger trend.
Oh, completely. The integration of generative AI into software development tools is exploding across the industry. It's not just Apple.
We mentioned Cursor earlier.
Yeah, and look at AnySphere, the company behind Cursor. There were reports recently, pretty eye-watering ones, actually.
About funding.
Huge funding. Something like $900 million raised at a valuation around $9 billion.
Wow. For an AI coding assistant platform.
Exactly. That kind of money tells you investors see massive potential in this space. It's not just a niche experiment anymore. It's seen as potentially transformative for how software gets built.
So the whole industry is moving towards AI-assisted coding.
It seems that way. GitHub Copilot, Amazon Code Whisperer, these new platforms like Cursor, Apple entering the fray, even internally, is just another sign of that broader shift.
Okay, so let's try and summarize this deep dive then. What are the key takeaways for you, the listener?
Well, first, we have these reports suggesting Apple is partnering with Anthropic.
Right, specifically using their Claude Sonnet model.
For an internal platform, currently codenamed Vibe Coding, which aims to use AI to help Apple's own engineers write, edit, and test code more effectively within Xcode.
And this fits into Apple's bigger AI picture, where they're also working with OpenAI and possibly Google for different kinds of AI features.
Exactly. It's a multi-partner approach, seemingly leveraging Anthropic's specific strengths in code generation for their internal development needs.
And it reflects that wider industry trend we just talked about, AI becoming deeply embedded in the software development process.
Definitely. It underlines how AI isn't just for chatbots or image generation anymore. It's starting to reshape the very core processes behind the technology we all use.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? As AI gets better and better at actually, writing the code, what happens next?
It's a fascinating question. How does that human-AI partnership evolve?
Yeah, what new kinds of software, what kinds of innovation become possible when developers are augmented in this way? What doors does it open?
That's the big unknown, and perhaps the most exciting part. It's something we'll all be watching unfold.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Something for all of us to keep considering as this tech continues to evolve so rapidly.